So is Riley muted
It didn't.
or?
It didn't take. Yeah, it didn't take me
Oh,
off the mute for some reason.
I'm glad it wasn't me.
Yeah, it normally does it automatically, but well, anyway, hey guys, welcome. This is the Concealed Carry Podcast, Season 12, Episode 14. And welcome to the Concealed Carry Podcast, part of the concealedcarry.com network, brought to you by HK. Today is Thursday, November 6th, 2025, as of the recording of this episode, and I am your host, Riley Bowman, joined by fellow host, Jacob Paulsen.
Yeah, I'm here.
He's here. He's so thrilled to be here, too. Can you see it in his face and hear it in his voice?
Yay!
I was just thinking as we watched the intro, we probably ought to update that. I mean, there's some good stuff in there, but there's probably some more we could add to that. Make that little opening pre-roll. For those of you that catch the podcast on the YouTube, I think that could be a fun tweak to update some footage there. What do you think, Jacob?
Yeah, probably a good idea.
Yeah. Well, today we're excited to be with you to actually talk about red dots on carry guns. Are they worth it? Lots to discuss. We've got some big news to share on the podcast today as well. Those of you that have been following our social media accounts recently, some of you may even be almost tired of seeing the content for, like a week or so now. It's been like all about red dots and optics on pistols, and we're going to talk about it some more. I promise you that's going to come, to an end here before too long. But we got some important stuff we got to get through first. I don't know. What do you want to share first, Jacob?
This episode is brought to you by, and the first spot I already forgot. Oh, the PIQ. Sorry, I'm going from memory.
I messed you up there. You didn't see it coming.
No, I didn't. That's okay. So we are giving away free sample targets. So the pistol intelligence target, you guys have heard us probably talk about that before. Riley designed this target several years ago. It's a highly functional, long-lasting, high-quality, full-size target. And normally, if you go and buy the PIQ target, you have to buy it in packs of 100. Now, that would last the average gun owner a long time. But you might be thinking, I just don't know if I want to buy 100 of these, and I've never tried them before. So we're now giving away, I suppose, is a little bit of a misnomer, but we're basically giving away free sample PIQ targets, just one target. Now, you have to pay shipping, so that's why it's not free, but it's very reasonable. It's like actually the cost of like postage plus the envelope it goes in is what you're paying us. And it is folded, so you're gonna have some creases in this little sample target as opposed to when you normally buy them, we roll them up. But it gives you a chance to try out the PIQ target for free plus the cost of shipping. So you should check that out at concealedcarry.com/PIQ sample. PIQ SAMPLE.
Awesome. Yep. Yeah, check out the PIQ target. They're hugely popular, especially amongst those that have used them and are familiar with them. They tend to keep coming back and buying more of them.
Yeah, they're not expensive. Even if you want to buy 100 of them, you could do that for like $50 or something. So it's not terrible.
Yeah. Awesome. Again, concealedcarry.com/PIQ sample. And today we have another kind of sponsor announcement. Got a new thing going on. It's relevant to the topic at hand. What do you want to talk about there?
I think we're going to hold off. I think we're going to break the news of the second sponsor a little bit later in the episode.
Okay. All right. Cool. Let's we'll save that for later in the episode. Keep people, on the edge of their seats.
Something.
Well, I guess with that out of the way, then let's jump into the topic. Red dots on carry guns. I mean, this is the Concealed Carry podcast, so most of us are talking about a concealed carry context. I know we have cops and others that listen to that are carrying guns in a duty, or maybe folks are carrying on a security job of some kind. But regardless of that context, we're talking about guns that are used for personal defense. Optics, do they belong on defensive guns, Jacob?
I recently, about 3-4 weeks ago, I attended an event called Revolver Fest. The event is put on and hosted by some friends of ours over at American Fighting Revolver. And there are 125 attendees at this event who spent 3 days shooting nothing but will guns. And I was reflecting on that today when I was thinking about this podcast episode, because here we are today talking about pistol optics, like the breaking, like newest technology, you know what I mean? As far as shooting, like it's like the real cutting edge thing, to have a pistol mounted optic in terms of technology. But here I was like 4 weeks ago shooting wheel guns that have been around for how long?
Yeah.
Ironically, of course, there were wheel guns with red dots on them, but that's really not the point I'm trying to make. The point I'm trying to make is, you know, when technology comes along, there's always a couple things that are going to be true. First, there's going to be cons. You know, very rarely does technology it's just all upsides. It's 100% good. That's just not the case most of the time. I just talked about revolvers, and we could think about the transition that took place from revolvers to semi-automatics, right? Like that was a significant change when the gun community, law enforcement, military, and others were transitioning to semi-automatics. Now, obviously, when we see these big shifts, whether whatever it is we're talking about, it tends to mean that the majority of people see more advantages than disadvantages to make that shift.
Right.
And that's what we see with red dots. So I think what I'm trying to say is we can't suggest that red dots are all, as I said recently, all puppies, rainbows, and roses. Like there are some cons, there are some trade-offs, but at large, what we're seeing with this new technology, like we have with most technologies in the past, is that the advantages greatly outweigh the disadvantages.
That's a great way of looking at it, because you could talk about, revolvers like you kind of started us off with, in saying that, I guess there was a transition at some point. Obviously, at one time, revolvers were the primary defensive tool. Semi-automatics have been around a long time. I mean, very simply put, the 1911 as the most popular example of that has been around since 1911, and
Yeah,
variations of that have been around since even earlier than that. The precursors to the 1911, the John Moses Browning design semi-automatics, and so those have been around a long time. But to your point, even up into the early 80s, there were still law enforcement agencies that was their standard sidearm issue, was a model 15, or maybe even model 19 in some cases, like actual true blue revolvers that were the primary defensive tool for law enforcement officers until not that many years ago, relatively speaking. And so that's a fair point, or fair way of looking at this, that there was a transition from revolvers to semi-automatics, and to your point, something had to be, hey, this is worth it, even though there are some trade-offs. Probably the primary trade-offs with semi-automatics for coming from revolvers would be, well, there's a greater potential, I guess you could say, for things like malfunctions, especially cycling and ammunition in related malfunctions
yeah.
in those guns. And so that was probably, I mean, I wasn't, well, maybe I was alive to some extent. I was just a little lad, but I'm sure there were some debates that were had about these newfangled semi-automatics aren't, reliable enough for me. I'm going to stick with my revolver. And there's probably still some people that would say that today, even. But
Yeah, but to your point, that transition took like 80 to 100 years, like to really transition. And to be fair, kind of where I started this off, there's still revolvers. There's still people who prefer revolvers. There will always be revolvers. Like we have not eliminated them at all. Like they're still out. Their market share is minuscule
yeah,
compared to the semi-automatic. It's hardly there at all. But they still exist. I just went to an event dedicated to the wheel gun, right? So I think that that's the way you have to look at this kind of thing and think about it. Now I'll get you mentioned malfunctions, right? Like because I said there's
yeah.
trade-offs, there's downsides. We're just weighing the benefits versus the cons, which we'll probably talk about a little bit today as it relates to the pistol mounted optic. But some of those cons are only perceived in the paradigm that we have at the time. So let's go back and use our same example, the wheel gun to the semi-automatic. in that transitionary period, yeah, I mean, certainly malfunctions came up a lot, which you mentioned, and to this day, we still, you know, I think generally perceive that malfunctions are more common on a semi-automatic. It'd be interesting to see the data, but I think that that's still the general perception and the way that most wheel gunners justify the wheel gun. But at the time during that transition, if we go back and look at the 70s, 80s, and early 90s, a big, massive concern and pushback on the semi-automatic was that they were unsafe because the trigger weight was so light, right? We went from
Yeah.
having these double action triggers, 10, 12, 15-pound triggers. And then all of a sudden we moved over to the semi-automatics with, in some cases, 1.5-pound triggers, 3-pound triggers, 4-pound triggers. And it was like, this is insane. These things are going off all the time. Cops, I was talking to, or I shouldn't say talking to, I was listening to Daryl Bolke at that event, Revolver Fest, and he was talking about how they trained cops when he came on the job. You were trained on the draw to get your finger in the trigger guard before you even cleared the holster. Many of them were running holsters that exposed the trigger guard so you could get your finger on the trigger before you drew the gun. Now, today, in today's paradigm in which gun owners reside, that sounds insane. We're like, holy crap, are you crazy? Like, you would never put your finger on the trigger, while you're still in the holster. That's nutty, man. That's so unsafe. Like, I can't even believe you'd say that out loud. How irresponsible of you. But that was the paradigm around the tool that was used all those years.
I was just going to add to what you're explaining, just for those where this is the first time they're hearing something like this. I've got, and it's not hard to find, there's dozens and dozens and dozens of examples. I've got photographic evidence of duty holsters from the era that you're referencing, Jacob, that are designed with trigger guard exposed.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, and in many cases, the revolver also couldn't rotate if the holster was shaped properly to the cylinder of the revolver. Then you couldn't fire it in the holster. But it still sounds crazy to us that just immediately clearing the holster that you could have your finger on your trigger. But in an era where you're running 12-pound triggers, that might have been reasonable because you could start to roll through that trigger and then change your mind. And halfway through and be like, oh no, cool, we don't have to shoot this dude. So at that time, in the paradigm that existed, because of the best practices that were crafted around the tool at the time, which was the revolver, people tried to apply the same paradigm to the semi-automatic. Yeah. And that's why we started having these issues of, oh, it's an unsafe gun. And I think we see some of that too with the red dot, where we in my opinion, the majority, I don't know if I can say majority, a large percentage of shooters who have adopted carry optics, pistol-mounted optics, are still utilizing them the way they did iron sights. And that's leading to those gun owners not getting the advantages completely that the tool offers them. Yeah. So those are some of the parallels I'm drawing in our little comparison. First, that hey, there's always going to be cons to new technology, and if you adapt it, it's because you see more pros than cons. And second, that when you move into new technology, you can't use it the same way you did the old, or you're just not. It's not going to work. It takes time for us to figure out, like, oh wait, with this tool, we don't need to do this anymore. We don't need to do that way anymore. We need to now do it like this, and that's how we're going to squeeze out the incremental performance or safety or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Actually, so I'm going to go ahead and throw this out there right now. I put it up on the screen earlier, but I wanted to come back to it. This is a question from Dwifta on YouTube. It says his biggest thing is focusing on the target, not my sights when using a red dot. Is that wrong? What kind of consideration should be made in that regard? And I'd say that, like, that's exactly the right path you should be on, Dwifta. So it's quite a name. I appreciate you chiming in there, Dwifta. That is the idea. Like, you should be target focused. And to what you're explaining, Jacob, that people maybe try to use the current tool, meaning this modern technology of the red dot, the same way they are used to using things like iron sights, meaning where we've been taught since I was a kid, and for decades now, the mantra has been front sight focus, front sight focus, front sight focus. And so we're so used to, I mean, even with the transition over to a red dot on a pistol, to be like, well, I'm going to, we just have a tendency to want to focus on the dot, even though the way it should appear to us is that dot is at the same focal plane as the target, and really where the focus should be, and where it always should have been was the target. That's where our focus should be. That's what's the most important thing. That's what we're actually trying to shoot. That's where the threat's located. That's where we need to read information about what's going on, what the threat is doing or not doing, so we can make good and proper and moral decisions. And so this is a total shift for a lot of people of, hey, stop focusing so much on the site itself. Focus on the target and allow the dot to come and be there. All right. And there's ways to make that happen more consistently and more repeatably for the shooter. And we can get into that. But yeah, good comment / question there from Dwifta. Just make sure, with using a dot, you should be target focused 100% all the time. And really what that entails then is that you learn to have a visual awareness of where the dot's located relative to where your eyes are locked on that target.
Yeah,
So.
that's a great example of what I was getting at. So and it kind of lays the groundwork for the big, the foundation that is the value that the red dot brings.
Yep. Yeah. So all of that context, I suppose, what are we trying to get at here today, Jacob?
Well, I think the first thing to understand is that despite me saying that, there's a large number of people out there who are going to say, great, like in theory, Jacob's right, but I don't see the benefits outweighing the cons.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, Jacob's not wrong, and because it's just obvious, like super obvious and common sense that when the advantages outweigh the disadvantages, you adapt and you change, right? Mm-hmm. To whatever the thing is. So got it. Are there enough of those?
Yeah, to give you an example, like if we were to have this conversation 10 years ago, right? You could probably only list one, maybe two miniaturized red dot sites, as they're sometimes also referred to as being reliable enough for this purpose of this topic that we're discussing today.
Yeah. And even that reliability could have been a little debated.
Yeah, but really, we're talking like in that conversation, real short on that short list is the Trijicon RMR, which has been kind of the gold standard for quite a long time now.
Yeah, commercially available in the U.S.
Yeah, that was pretty much it. And now today, this conversation is very different. We have a lot of options that are really solid options, that are reliable, that are robust, that are durable, that are that you can rely upon.
Well, and in 10 years we're gonna have more, and because it's always if something is reliable or robust is an unknown quantity when it hits the marketplace, right? Mm-hmm. So we have optics right now that are in the infant stage of data. Mm-hmm. Right. But we received an email at the podcast email this last week from somebody who was asking about a very specific brand of optic. And they said, hey, I've heard you guys talk about these. I bought such and such brand of optic. I haven't heard a lot about it. What do you think? And that was my response. It's sort of like, well, indicators as of right now are all good, but it's too early to know. Yeah. And because I'm not the guinea pig. I don't have some like battle testing protocol that I can use to go put a bunch of, I don't have the money either to go beat up a bunch of product. So I, like most, am going to like quietly observe the community, rely on the heavy users like law enforcement and the military to provide the data to say, yeah, this is proving to be really good. So that's my point, is that today, you have a lot of products that are pretty well tested, battle tested for lack of a better word. And then you have a whole bunch more that look pretty good, but the jury's still out a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And that'll always be the case, just ongoing development of product. I'll give you an example. I was actually just doing some research today on this, and it was, mentioned that I'm not going to mention the specific one right now. It's not really relevant to this specific discussion right this moment. But there was a brand that, in a specific optic from that brand, that somebody had provided some data on, that they had done some testing, and 3 different samples of that very optic. So 3 different individual units, and it's not this one, I'm just holding one up as an example, that they had in, all failed in around 500 rounds or so. That's not very encouraging for that particular optic. I mean, I suspect that company is going back to the drawing board with something there, or at least I would like to think so. So that's just the reality of things. Somebody comes out with a new product, it's going to get tested. People are going to put it to work, hopefully, and pretty soon we'll find out. It's usually pretty quick to find out if something's a piece of crap. It's usually a little bit of a longer process to get to where it's like, this is a proven optic that that I would recommend for putting on a carry gun, for instance.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same with anything else. Same thing with
Yeah,
guns.
yeah.
New guns come to the marketplace. I mean, it's interesting, like, right now, it's just now that we're seeing a whole bunch of good data and feedback on the P365, right? And that gun's been out for, I don't know, what, like 5 years or 6 years or something?
It's funny that you say that right now, because just yesterday I saw a post from a friend
Mm.
saying that they don't think it's that good.
I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm not weighing in on the quality of the gun. I am
Yeah.
suggesting that over the last year and a half, I've seen a lot more reports coming back on the longevity of a gun than when it was initially, launched in the marketplace. It became a top seller almost overnight, and I carried that gun for some time.
Hmm.
Um, but now years later, we're getting feedback. So I'm just suggesting
Oh
that
yeah, yeah, okay.
more
Yeah,
time
I'm
means more
tracking you.
data.
Yeah, yeah. And you're speaking about a gun that I have personally tens of thousands of rounds through.
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, through multiple samples of. So anyway, yeah, all right. Um,
So
so
I
speaking
would
of
like to
data,
see more data. Yeah, let's look at the
yeah,
data.
exactly. That's where the next jumping off point is here. There, I think that there's still a lot that needs to be studied further, because one of the things that's difficult about things in the gun space is getting actual legitimized studies and research done on gun related things because a lot of universities and whatnot, I mean, one, they don't care, and secondly, they might have a bias against such. Actually, they likely have a bias against guns and gun related products. But there are a few things, and I'm going to point you to, first of all, and I've been familiar with this resource for a number of years now, but some of the best information that I've relied upon for years is from Aaron Cowan at Sage Dynamics. For years now, I think he's on his seventh edition, and he's probably ready to publish an eighth edition, would be my guess, because I think he's been doing an update about once every year or two, and it's been 2 years since the last edition was released. But he has a white paper on his website, sagedynamics.org is where you can find it. It's called Miniaturized Red Dot Systems for Duty Handgun Use. Now, yes, he is very specifically interested in optics on pistols in a duty context. He's trying to provide information and research and data for law enforcement agencies primarily that are looking at potentially adopting or using or issuing or approving optics on their officers' handguns. And so what's cool about that is, this 70 plus page white paper, he's got quite a few data points in there that I think are interesting to note and be aware of. And that's why I start by bringing that up right now, is I think that that's a good place to start. I don't know that you've reviewed that at all, Jacob, but I'm happy to go over a couple of key points in that white paper.
I've seen like a summary only. I've not really gone deep with it, and only the most recent one. I haven't been following it either, so I'm happy to let you,
Yeah.
tell us about it.
Yeah. So the first thing I would point you to is he actually, and then this is just context for us to think about how an optic is used on a pistol. Um, so this is not data yet, but I'm going to get to that. But just contextually, he talks about a lot of different things, including stress response, that people go through when we're dealing with life or death situations, and kind of what that does to the body. And so you're talking about adrenaline and an SNS response and all of that, right? And one thing that I wanted to start by talking about and hitting on, and people have probably heard things like this before, is where he explains what happens with the muscles, the little muscles in the eye that are responsible for basically focusing, like what we are able to actually focus on, which is known as accommodation. Uh, those little muscles start to not work as well when we are under significant stress. And so the major takeaway from that is that the ability, and it's not a guaranteed thing, it's going to depend on the type of stress response. It's going to depend on how sudden, for instance, something happens. Like if we are truly shocked or surprised, that's one thing compared to a situation that develops a little more gradually, to where we're able to stay more in like a decision making, kind of mindset. But if we have a sudden adrenaline dump or SNS system in our body activates, then what happens is the ability to, or what can happen is the ability to focus at objects that are close to us. It degrades sometimes significantly, and so I'm just providing that context because that's interesting to think about. Because for those people that are like, well, iron sights are the way for me. I've tried red dots. I don't like them. I've been using iron sights for 40 years and, I'm just going to stick with what I know. And it's like, that's cool. More power to you. Although it is possible that in a situation where you need to rely upon iron sights, particularly if you are using them in the traditional sense of front sight focus, you may not actually physically be able to focus on your front sight when you're under stress. And so that just reinforces the idea that target focus, which is what humans have been doing for millennia, is, when faced with a threat, our body is wired to want to focus on the threat, because that is like the thing that is of utmost importance in the moment, is what this thing or person or animal or creature or whatever it is trying to do to me, and what do I need to do to try to survive, typically in the context of how do I stop this, right? And so target focus is really the way, and not just because it's superior, but because that's the way our bodies are actually wired to work. So,
Yeah. I'm just thinking that's highly relevant, right? Like, because we're talking here, do pistol-mounted optics bring enough advantages to overcome the disadvantages? And we've kind of been dancing around those. But here's one that's very specific, like my ability to focus, especially when under stress or duress, is challenged at the plane that the gun sights would be.
Yep.
So being target focused is going to be more natural, more instinctive, and I'm going to be more capable of that. And so therefore, I'll be able to aim more efficiently or effectively or at all with the optic.
Yeah. So now let's go ahead and actually look at some data. And I'm going to jump to, and this has been published elsewhere, but I'm glad Aaron includes this in his white paper. Back in 2011, Norwich University conducted a range study. I'm quoting from the paper right now, comparing the Trijicon RMR to traditional iron sights. Now, keep in mind, why specifically that optic? Well, because in 2011, it was pretty much
That was the optic.
That you could use for this. It wasn't the only, but it was primarily the one that was considered to be, strong and robust enough for the, these kinds of purposes. So the goal of the study, it says, was to identify an advantage in accuracy, if any, of the RMR, or we could just replace that with red dots or pistol optic, over traditional iron sights. Okay, so the results from this are actually quite stunning. They put these individuals, they were all university students, and by the way, some of them had prior firearms and or hunting experience, and some didn't have much experience, if any at all. And what's interesting is, and I'll come back to that, is the results, regardless of their level of experience, there's some interesting takeaways from that that's mentioned later in the study. But they put them through 4 different stages of fire. Let me describe those for you, because these address, even though it's, this was a study and they've got to do it in a
Controlled manner.
Controlled way, exactly, right? So we got to control some variables. But I think they did a pretty good job of accommodating for maybe, further away, more accuracy-based shooting, to closer up, in your face, fast engagements, to things that are in between that. And so let me explain what these 4 shooting stages were that these students fired. So the first one was that they just had to shoot 15 yards, slow fire, 10 rounds, untimed. So no pressure, no stress. I mean, reasonably so. So just 15 yards, take as much time as you need to get 10 rounds on target. That was the stage 1. Stage 2. Now it's 5 yards. That's relatively close. So we could say that 5 yards is a very reasonable self-defense type distance. I mean, that's about the length of a typical, room in a house, right?
Sure.
So 5-yard rapid engagement, starting from center chest retention hold position, it says, and upon a signal from a pro timer or a shot timer, engage the target and fire 2 shots. The times were recorded for each shot, and this was repeated 9 more times. So, and they did a total of 20 shots. So they did this 10 times of where they basically at 5 yards just from a high ready type position or a close retention position, just present out and fire 2 shots. Okay. Stage 3, 10-yard rapid engagement. So now again, a little bit more of an intermediate distance. And stage 3 is the same as stage 2, except the distance was just further. Okay. So, and they repeated it half as many times. So they only did 5 times of that for a total of 10 shots. But it was the same idea. On the beep of the timer, present out, fire two rounds at the 10-yard target. And then stage 4 was a 10-yard rapid engagement with multiple targets now. Rapid fire, okay, and these were also at 10 yards. They had to shoot 2 different targets that were spaced about 6 feet apart. They did it for a total of 6 times, 2 shots each time. So I think it was 1 shot on one target, 1 shot on the other target for a total of 12 shots. So that's your 4 stages, okay? So we do have further away accuracy-based slow fire. We've got up close rapid fire. We've got stuff that's in between, including also transitions now between targets. That's the 4 stages. They used Glock 19 handguns, and they used an IDPA target for scoring. So they're looking how many hits are in the down 0, how many are in the down 1, which is kind of like the Charlie zone for those that are familiar with USPSA targets. And then there's the down 3 zone, which was they called it zone 3. So zone 1 is where you wanted to be in the down 0. Then zone 2 is like the Charlie, and zone 3 was essentially like the Delta zone.
Yeah.
All right. So they did this, and if you look at the actual, there's charts that are attached to this. I'm going to start just by describing these. I don't know if you had a chance to at least look at the charts, Jacob.
Nope.
In our outline, you can scroll down and see images of these charts, these data points. But the first thing was just looking at all 4 stages and hit percentages. All right. So stage 1, again, it was the slow fire on far target. And hit percentage, and to be clear, when they say a hit, it's anywhere on the target. Okay, so this is not counting it's in the down 0 or the zone 1, for instance. This is just they got a hit on the target. Okay, hit percentage for that first stage was nearly 100%. It's like 90-something percent, 97% thereabouts for those using the red dot. For iron sights, hit percentage was down to 70-something percent.
Yeah, 78 maybe. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, I have the specific numbers somewhere. I could pull them up. Yeah. Just for sake of time, I'm just going to give you the rough, whereabouts they were. For the second stage, that's the close-up 5 rounds rapid fire. Hit percentage with the red dot was like 100%. And hit rate for iron sights only was also pretty good. It was like 90-something percent. Okay, but it's still less than with the red dot. Then the zone 3, which is the 10-yard rapid fire, hit percentage for red dots was like 95%, and for iron sights was more like low 80%. Okay, and then for the 4th stage, which is the 2 targets you hit the transition between, again, hit percentage is very similar for the red dot shooters to the stage 3, so like mid to high 90s, and hit percentage for iron sights was low 80% range. Okay, so it's like, okay, all right, so that just tells us that across all the 4 stages, across between both sighting systems, iron sights only versus red dot only, the hit percentage all across the board was always better with an optic on the gun. Okay, in some cases it wasn't that big of a difference. Like the smallest amount of difference between sighting systems was obviously on the close distance 5-yard rapid fire shots. Not maybe a huge surprise there. And so some people I know would use a data point like that, Jacob, but this comes up quite often in debates is, well, self-defense, shootings are always are close distance. And so therefore it doesn't really matter if I have an optic on there or not, right?
That's silly.
Yeah. But even in this data, with this data we have here, hit percentages were still better even with a red dot on the gun, even on those closer
The
shots.
gap might have been tighter, but it was still improved.
So here's what I'm going to do next is I'm going to mostly just focus on, we have data points for all the different stages, which are all very interesting to see. But I want to actually focus more on the second stage. Yes, the second stage. Here it is. Because this I think is really interesting and quite telling. So if you look at the second stage results, now it gives us hits by zone. Okay. So now we're talking about that down zero, which is like high center chest, where you want them to be, in that central, thoracic cavity where your pump house and your aorta and all that are at. That's where we want them to be, right? Hit percentage in that zone 1 for iron sights only was under 60%. Whereas hit percentage with the red dot was like closer to 75%. Now, I would have liked to see maybe even a higher percentage than that, just my own personal bias. But we are talking about a close distance rapid fire engagement, and there is a 15+% difference in how many hits are in the like critical area versus not for the iron sights compared to red dot.
Yeah.
And so that kind of just prepares you then that what we see in the rest of those 3 other stages is that the hit percentages get worse and like the difference between red dot and iron sights gets greater and greater and greater the more challenging the shooting becomes.
And these were pretty like good size sample groups, and both groups had comparable number of people who had past experience with firearms and those who had no experience with firearms. And the study looks pretty well done, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. And I said I was going to come back to that. Actually, sorry. It states this in the study. It says the data showed no difference between those who shot with iron sights and those who used the red dot, as far as looking at whether they had experience or not. Essentially, the data across the board was if the shooter had experience, then they performed better with a red dot than they did with iron sights. If they didn't have experience, they performed better with a red dot than they did with iron sights. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It it makes so much sense to me. Like in hindsight, it does.
Mhm.
Like if I circle back to when I was considering the optic, when I first put the optic on my gun, I don't, then then I would have been like, wow, that sounds freaking crazy. Like that's interesting. But now in hindsight, it's like, well, duh. Like it's so much easier to perform. It really is. Yeah, I'm going back to my car thing again, but it really is the equivalent of driving the automatic transmission versus a stick shift. Like it is that much easier. In fact, it's even a bigger gap than that. When we kicked off the recording of this podcast, we had like this little 30-second little clip that shows you and me shooting some guns in a little video. And in that clip, I can see me shooting with irons and I can see me shooting with the dot. And it was, I'd never really noticed that before. We've been using that video for, I don't know, a year or more, but you see it and it's like, geez, like, okay, like that. I can tell the difference in my own performance pretty readily. So anyway, I guess that's pretty anecdotal to go with the data. But to me, whether you're a brand new shooter or you're a very experienced shooter, the dot makes a pretty sizable impact.
Yeah. I mean, anecdotally, that's what I would say about myself as well. Now, before we get too much further along here, I do have a couple more data points I think would be worth sharing for the podcast here today. But maybe now would be a good time to, at the very least, tease our secondary sponsor of the episode.
Yeah, good idea. So this week we are kind of doing this big special emphasis on carry optics, pistol optics, red dots, whatever, because we are getting ready to release and launch a brand new training program called Carry Optics Mastery. Now, we're recording this episode on Thursday, November 6th. So if you're watching this live or you're catching this later today and you try and go and find it, it won't be there because tomorrow November 7th is the official open, launch day of this new training program. Most of you will hear this when we publish it to the audio feed, and by then the course will be available for purchase. But it's worth noting that we have some special launch bonuses and things like that are available only for the first week that this course is for sale. So you probably want to move quickly to take advantage of those things. And it's in the top 3 most lengthy courses we've ever done. It's over 8 hours long.
Yeah.
So that's pretty significant amount of content. Riley is the only instructor on this one. I did not co-instruct or no one else participated in that respect. Since this falls directly, I hate to give Riley too much credit when he's listening, because I don't want you to get too much ego. But this course falls like directly in line with Riley's core, like specialized competency as a firearm instructor. So anyway, Riley's the instructor on the course. It's over 8 hours long. It's all about carry optics, and it's significant in its nature of its comprehensiveness. So it starts out very basic. What is a red dot? It goes into maintenance. How do we maintain the red dot? It talks about features and attributes of different dots. Brightness adjustments and batteries, and it talks about pros and cons, and considerable things that you need to be aware of that are not maybe ideal with the optics. And then it gets into the actual performance aspects. How do we leverage this tool to improve our shooting? How do we take advantage of it in a way that we maximize its value? And what are even drills and exercises you can perform that help you build the skill of working in that new paradigm and optimizing the value of the tool and putting it to use, and much more. So it's a fabulous course. It's all video. Once you have it, you have it. So you can watch it, rewind it, jump around, watch it with friends. All the things. So yeah, that's the, I guess, elevator pitch for Carry Optics Mastery.
Yeah, worked really hard on this it's actually, we filmed a lot of this summer.
Yeah.
And since then, been working on it, getting it edited, getting it produced, getting, everything in order to get it ready for launch and release. Super excited to see it come to fruition. I do think it's probably the most comprehensive pistol optics carry optics oriented video course that you can find online. There are a couple others out there that I'm familiar with, and I've viewed several of them. And this, I think, we really do a deep dive on a lot of things, and that's I think what's kind of unique about it is we give you all the things, all the information, all the education on what these little things, these optics are, how they work, how they operate, their features, all of that, but then also teach you how to use them, how to shoot with them, how to, what are the fundamentals involved in doing that. And the drills, like you mentioned, the drills I think are super helpful for people to start really learning how to use them the most effective way they can. If they'll apply themselves and put everything to practice, and both in dry fire as well as in live fire in the range, I think you'll see significant improvements in your shooting with a carry optics equipped gun. So where you can learn more, okay, and as Jake mentioned, not going to probably, it's not, the product is not yet available till tomorrow. And that's the other cool thing about you catching this on the podcast here today is this, you guys are the first to hear about this officially. The rest of the folks are going to hear about it tomorrow when the emails and all that go out. Go to concealedcarry.com/COM. That's for Carry Optics Mastery is what that stands for. concealedcarry.com/COM. It's going to look like concealedcarry.com/com. So that's the link. And it'll be live tomorrow to sign up and order your own copy of the the Carry Optics Mastery course. A couple of bonuses are going to come along with that I think are really important that you're going to want to know about. One, you're going to get, actually, one is pretty big deal. You're going to get a $50 off coupon from any optic that we sell on concealedcarry.com. We already list things pretty much at the minimum advertised price that's allowed. So what that means is that's your opportunity to get your hands on your next optic for below the allowed price, essentially. So kind of a big deal. Okay, you save some dough on your next optic by doing that. So you can subtract that right away off the cost of the course itself, and I think that becomes a pretty big selling point. But we've also worked really hard to put together a pistol optics guide, which you can go to concealedcarry.com/POG to get access to that resource, that online resource that breaks down things and as far as footprints and dot sizes and types of emitter designs and so on and so forth. Breaks that all down in a real simple format for people to be able to understand, so you can understand optics and guns and how they're going to fit on there and all that, and how to choose the right optic for you. That's all available at that pistol optics guide. And also we designed a custom zeroing target to help you with zeroing an optic on your pistol, to make that just as brainless as possible. Like, use your brain, yes, but it just makes it really easy. So that's also part of this whole thing that we've been working on and putting together for you. So anything else I failed to mention, Jacob?
There's also a couple downloadable resources that are included with the course. You're going to get an
Yes.
ebook, which is kind of meant to be a companion guide or an alternative way to consume the material and the content. There's also a installation downloadable manual for pistol optics that we think is really valuable. So those are things that are included, as kind of bonuses when you buy the course.
Super excited about that ebook as well. So that's another thing that doesn't really exist from the other courses I've seen online. I don't think any of them come with a companion ebook. So super really excited about all of this. So guys, again, concealedcarry.com/COM to get your copy to get complete access to all those things, including the bonuses and the $50 coupon, all of that of the Carry Optics Mastery course. All right. Couple more things here while we still have a little bit of time. So I wanted to share with you, Jacob, that one other thing that Aaron Cowan at Sage Dynamics did is in 2014, he decided to do his own force-on-force study. So he involved 12 students and put them through a number of different force-on-force scenarios. They were using simunitions Glocks. One was converted to have just an optic on it, and the other was iron sight only, so they could compare those side by side. And just I'll break this down really simply and give you I'll just give you the answers right now. This is the cheat sheet, if you will. After comparing everything between iron sights and optics in these force-on-force scenarios, what was interesting is that the total rounds fired is not that different, although on the iron sight only side, so the gun with only iron sights, students did end up firing about 10% more rounds overall. Okay, which hard to know all the reasons exactly why, but I suspect that could be related to some rounds missing. Okay, but about 10% more rounds fired. But what's really surprising is when you look at the hit percentages, okay? And then beyond that, don't just look at hit percentages like anywhere on the body, but look at how many hits were critical or what were considered to be in critical zones. So, areas that are likely to result in a stoppage. That's where the data is really telling, that really separates optics from iron sights on guns in these force-on-force scenarios. So the total, just give you an example, in the total rounds fired with optics, about half of those rounds, almost exactly half of those rounds hit in critical areas. Most of the rounds hit, period, but about half of them hit in critical areas. So like high thoracic, chest cavity or head or thereabouts. 70 rounds out of the 262 rounds total fired were considered misses. Probably more than I'd like to see, but hey, half of the rounds fired hit in critical areas. Critical areas are going to result potentially in a relatively fast stop, right? Here's the big difference here. Iron sight equipped guns, or the shooters that are using iron sighted guns, out of all the rounds they fired, yes, about half or maybe a little more than half rounds hit, but a very small percentage, like 20% of those hits, or of total rounds fired, only 20% actually hit in critical areas. And then you could think of this as he calls it a hit map. You could almost describe it as a heat map. Where are the rounds concentrated at? And this is where it's really telling. Did you look at this, Jacob?
I
The
did.
iron sight hit map, for those using the iron sighted gun, simunition gun, the hits are kind of all over the place. They're not super well focused.
Yeah, we would call this the degree of variance is significant.
Yeah, right, exactly. But then you look at the hit map for the students using the iron or the optic equipped pistol, and you see a pretty good concentration of hits in the chest, some in the head, and those that are elsewhere are there's really not a high percentage of them. Like it's really quite telling. So what were your thoughts on that when you saw that?
Yeah, I mean the visual aspect of it is pretty compelling. So most of you are, nature of a podcast is you guys aren't going to see that as part of this, but I think the takeaway here, I guess I'll start specific and then I'll go more broad. But yeah, specific to this study. Oh, there you go. Riley's sharing a screen. So those of you who are watching the video maybe we'll see this.
Yeah, I'm trying here.
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
We'll try it again.
But the takeaway is the consistency of hits is better. So it's one thing to look at the data and say, well, a hit's a hit's a hit. Red dots get more hits. It's another thing to look at the data and say, yeah, but what about good hits versus less good hits? And red dots get way more good hits than the irons do based on this data. And that's true of both the first study that Riley referenced and the second study as well. I think we've really been focused here on this performance aspect, right? Like, will a dot make me a better shooter? And I think that so far, every research study that's been done and all the data that we have, and something that Riley's probably not going to present here today, but competitive shooters look at this data all the time, right? Because like you were just at a match, you're wearing a shirt right now from some match you competed in, and in that match, you're going to have different divisions are going to run through the same stages. So at the match, they set up the stages, and some people are going to. Oh, there we go. Here's that hit map for those who are going to look at it. So there's the iron sights. You can see it very dispersed across the target area. And then compare that with this. Here's the hit map for those with the dot. And you can see it way more concentrated in the critical target area.
A lot more consistent.
Yeah. So all the data supports that. What I was going to say about competitive shooting is like at a match where I'm not much of a competitor myself, but Riley, you were just at a match. And at a match, a bunch of stages are set up. And then they have multiple divisions of shooters. So you have a division of shooters that are running an optic on their gun, and you're going to have some divisions of shooters that don't run an optic on their gun, but they're all going to run through the same stages. Now, at the end of the match, when the scoring is done, they're going to say, well, people in this division, here's how you placed, and people in that division, this is how you placed. But all the data is available, so savvy shooters will go look at that and say, well, on average, do the top shooters that have an optic on their gun outperform the shooters that don't have an optic on their gun? And that's also very consistent. And that's a massive load of data. That's not, 12 shooters who, participated in a study one day. That's like thousands and thousands. And I mean, it's hundreds of thousands of rounds fired. That data is.
Yeah.
And so to me, that's highly compelling. It's like the best, if we look at the best shooters in the world and we put them in the categories of those who are not running a dot and those who are, and we send them to the same match where they run the exact same shooting problem, shooting solution, then the ones who have the dot have higher scores. They get, they get more points per second. Like, it's not complicated.
I was going to actually at least try to fit that in and bring that up. The best example, the best way of comparing red dot to iron sight performance and in the match setting is to look at steel challenge data because the stages are relatively simple. They're quick. Everybody shoots the exact same thing. And round count or round capacity in the guns is not really a relevant factor, because in some divisions, in some of the shooting sports, you might have an iron sight division that doesn't compare very well to an optic division, because maybe in the iron sight division you're limited to so many rounds. Like, give you an example, in IPSC, for instance, you're limited to 30 or 15 rounds in a magazine, whereas in limited division, or I should say carry optics in IPSC is 15 rounds, but let's say limited division is, you could have 20, 22, 23 rounds sometimes. So sometimes you get some of those like discrepancies.
So still challenge
So Steel
reduces the number of
Challenge,
variables.
because to shoot each time, you only have to have 5 rounds in the gun, basically, right? And so when we look at the data for Steel Challenge performance, consistently, this is true across the rifle divisions, rimfire, PCC, optics, or iron sight. All the pistol divisions, iron sight only, and optics divisions on the pistol side, rimfire or centerfire, consistently across the board at every match, at all the national championships, at the area championships, consistently the optics equipped divisions are the ones that come out on top. And so that's very telling about the performance advantage of an optic equipped pistol. I did want to share one more thing. We're basically about out of time here, but and all these links, I'll try to make sure are in the show notes. But recently, like back in January, I think it was, there was a report released from National Law Enforcement Firearms Instructors Association. This is called the National Survey, Officer Involved Shootings with Pistol Red Dot Sights, or RDS. Okay, they conducted this over the years 2019 to 2024. They determined that they were going to run this for a longer period of time. Like, they were going to keep data coming in, but part of this was to determine when duty pistols had been widely accepted in the law enforcement community. And they'd already decided that they are now becoming widely accepted in the law enforcement community. And so they're like, the purpose of us continuing to run this survey is no longer required. But what they did is they collected some data over those 5 years from officer-involved shootings where the officers were using optics on their guns. And there's a lot of data there you can go look at, and I think it's very interesting. But what I really wanted to share, Jacob, was these are firsthand accounts from respondents of the survey. So those involved in the actual shooting. And I just wanted to share a few they were asked to, it said here, anything notable about this incident that relates to the use of your pistol RDS? Okay, so that's the question they were asking these officers. And I just wanted to share a couple of these. Now, these are anecdotal, but I think these are very telling from the perspective of somebody that's actually been faced with a life or death situation that required them to use their gun. So here's a couple of things. An officer, he vividly remembered seeing the red dot on target for each round fired. Okay, there's one. Target acquisition was fantastic, fast and accurate. That's another officer's report. Aided in quick acquisition of sight/dot and subsequent rounds on target. Easier identification of suspect. He said, I barely had to look at my weapon before firing. I just kept on my eyes on the subject and fired when I could see the dot. This one I really like. By utilizing the optic on my handgun, I was enabled a larger picture of the suspect's actions, as well as a sighting system that had a much smaller minute of angle of traditional handgun iron sights. This is very specific. The window of the optic flowed as seamless as possible in an incident that less than 1.5 seconds would afford for all my rounds fired downrange. That's really interesting.
This guy's a geek. I like it.
I was able to easily locate the dot during the incident. The subject was lying prone as I was standing near him, holding him at gunpoint until I shot him. Only one shot was necessary to subdue the threat. After the shot was fired, I was again easily able to locate the dot in case a secondary shot was necessary. And then finally, this is very brief, but it says foot pursuit and distance of 40.66 yards.
Yeah, I think. Sorry, go ahead.
Just meaning that, like, this guy had to take a long shot, and I took that to mean that this was a good thing that I had the RDS because it was a long shot.
I think the nature of the study ending is really telling. So it's like in 2019, probably the idea for it was born in 2017. Probably got the funding in 2018. I'm making that up, but it's not far fetched. So they kick off the study in 2019. And they're like, hey, we're getting questions, from agencies that are part of our association of law enforcement agencies about, red dots, whether or not they're viable for law enforcement use. So we're going to go do some studies, some research, some data. And only 5 years go by, right? In 2014, they're looking at the marketplace. They're like, this was a waste of time and money, because now that we have gathered enough data to put out the results, the marketplace has left us behind. Everyone already has dots. Like no one waited for us to be able to answer the question. They all just moved forward because the data that was out there was so compelling as to the advantages of the dot. So I guess we'll end the study and we'll put that info out there that supports what everybody's already done without our data anyway.
Yeah. A recent article on Police One talked about this, referenced this as well, and basically said, it's clear that law enforcement agencies, not all of them yet, but many of them are adopting this. That red dots are here to stay. The key now is our law enforcement officers, and I'm saying this more broadly, are all of us self-defense minded folks that carry a gun for whatever purpose, using them effectively and to their max potential? And the answer to that is no. We can always do better. And that's partly why we've released this Carry Optics Mastery course, is we want to help you, our audience, our listeners, our followers at concealedcarry.com, to be able to use an optic equipped pistol more effectively. And if you haven't adopted it yet, and we're not here to force you to do that, but hopefully we provided some information today that makes you go, maybe there's something worth at least looking into here. Maybe that's all it is, and that's fine. But if you are also just thinking, or you're on the fence about getting into optics on a pistol, I'd like to think that we could provide something for you to help you in that transition and being able to learn it and using it to its max potential. And that's why the Carry Optics Mastery course exists.
Yeah, I mean, maybe someone here is listening to this and saying, I'm just, I'm an old dog who doesn't learn new tricks and, leave me alone, let me do my thing. But if you plan on owning and carrying guns, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, then it is an inevitability that you're going to put an optic on that gun. And the next gun you buy 5 years from now, 6 years from now, 7 years from now, it's going to come probably with an optic already on the gun. Like you're going to have a hard time in a certain number of years from now, and it's not 10, it's probably less than 10 years, you're going to have a hard time buying a gun that doesn't come with an optic.
Yep.
So it is an inevitability. The question is, are you going to embrace that now, or are you going to hold out longer for whatever arbitrary reason? Now there are reasons, like that. We did a couple of videos this week. They're on concealedcarry.com. You can go find them, kind of in anticipation of this product launch. And one of them, we talked about cons of red dots. Like, what are the downsides? And for me, the biggest downside by far is cost. You're going to spend money. So I think that that's a reality. That's
I don't know if Jacob's the only one that's frozen or if it's me, but Jacob's frozen for me. So, all righty. Well, don't know if we're going to get him back or what. So we are at the point where we got to wrap up the podcast, unfortunately, because I've got a hard stop. So with that, I don't know what happened there. I'm sorry, Jacob, but hey, one more call to action here. Carry Optics Mastery Training Program, concealedcarry.com/COM is the link where you can get it. Hope that you will at least take a look and consider whether it's a good training program for you or not. Remember all the awesome bonuses that are available, including the $50 coupon off of your next optic purchase at concealedcarry.com. And also the complimentary ebook that goes along with that and everything else. Also a reminder, you can check out the Pistol IQ Target. If you don't have one of those yet or you haven't tried them yet and you'd like to try them, you can get a free sample target at concealedcarry.com/PIQ sample. So that'd be the other thing to remind you of with respect to our episode sponsors here today. So folks, thank you so much for being with us for this episode of the Concealed Carry podcast. Appreciate the opportunity to spend some time with you talking about red dots on carry guns and whether they're worth it or not. We think they are. Now it's up to you to decide whether you think so or not as well. Hey, look, Jacob is hopefully back. We'll try to bring him back in here. Yeah, you totally froze on us.
Yep. That was super frustrating. I don't even know what I was saying now that I've been yelling at my computer for the last 60 seconds.
Well, I was just wrapping it up and giving, one last shout out to our sponsor, links today. Jacob, any final words before we say goodbye?
Embrace the dot. Do it now. If you're concerned about money, then look for the cost-efficient ways to do it. Send us an email if we can be helpful. If you're trying to figure out what you're doing, what gun, what optic, things like that, email us. We're happy to help. Podcast@concealedcarry.com.
Yep, our support team is awesome. Jason and the guys are great. And if they don't know something, they forward it to me or Jacob, and we'll definitely help address. So, well, folks, until next time, a reminder to train right, train often, and train safe so you can fight hard, fight fast, and fight true. Take care.